IgG evidence, investigative genetic genealogy, that is the evidence that has been turned over to the defense of Bryan Kohberger in that case. It's evidence that was used to generate leads, but did not have any use in obtaining any sort of warrants. Good to always, in discovery, have both sides on the same page with all of this information. It kind of alleviates any sort of appellate issues down the road, even if this isn't going to be used in the actual trial itself, which is what the prosecution is saying. Here to discuss exactly what this all means in IgG evidence, Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. What does this all mean? Because we hear all sorts of different types of DNA and the IgG evidence. When it comes to this and it being turned over, is this going to have any sort of bearing whatsoever on the case against Kohberger when it comes up?
Well, I think it would have had a colossal bad implications if it wouldn't have been turned over.
Hmm.
So I think it's always very important, as you well said, that the defense is privy and able to see what is available. So from that standpoint, I think this was the right call. Secondarily, will it be helpful? It'll be interesting to see. I don't think, I honestly think it's uh, nothing burger
Yeah.
in this situation because I just don't believe that the different avenues they had to look down, the different genealogy to get to the one that was actually fruitful in this case is going to be of any impact.
Where do the issues come in? Because I know there's some privacy concerns with IgG evidence when it comes to the way that it was obtained and how it's obtained in general right now. Oftentimes without warrants, just part of the databases that people are or that the investigators have to use to try and lead them down a specific path. Even if it does, I guess, I don't violate any rights, but if it leads you to point A to point B to someone that you are searching for, and nobody's rights are technically really being violated, but that information is being used to lead to someone. Where do the issues come into play with that?
Well, I believe since the Bureau was involved, these are going to be all the records would have been obtained via search warrant. Even in situations that the Bureau goes in where we get somebody to consent, where we have a plain view doctrine in play, all the other ways you can actually get evidence, we still like to get search warrants because it's just the for instance, Brian Kohberger's DNA, the cheek, the swab. If you look at that, he would have been swabbed incident to arrest anyway.
Mhm.
But they went the extra step to get the search warrant. I guess what I'm saying, Tony, is I don't think there's going to be any issue with how the evidence they collected was obtained. I think it's more looking at it as a privacy issue that the general public may be concerned about.
Mhm.
That even if they sign a document that says, listen, you can't release this, to know that these companies have to produce the information when they're under a warrant, a
Mhm.
valid warrant. So I think that's the issue that some people have. But I think, Tony, don't you, that most people would want to help? Maybe not. But if, it's a fifth cousin or nephew, something way down their line that
Mhm.
that information ends up leading to a Brian Kohberger because it's it's going to be a series, I think, that led ultimately to the father's DNA,
Mhm.
right? I think most people would want to help get a potential killer off the street and to help make things safe, but maybe I'm just being ideological.
Well, I mean, most people would hope that someone like Brian Kohberger, if in fact he's guilty, doesn't exist. That someone wouldn't do something like that. I do wonder in cases like this, and I'm not saying that Kohberger's family would be against using that genetic information to track down and discover, hey, maybe their son is in fact a killer. But you do have situations where people cover for their children. This is not an example of IgG evidence, but a situation where parents really went above and beyond to cover for their child. Look at the Gabby Petito case. We see now that going into a civil litigation with the laundries. I would not be surprised if there's some people that would raise a hand saying, yeah, that person does in fact ended up being guilty, but you had to use my information to get there, and I didn't consent for you to use that information. And if you didn't have that information, you wouldn't have found the information on said criminal.
Well, well said, and that's going to be, certainly possibly argued in the future, maybe even in connection with this case. And there could be case law that comes down that could, impact future cases and cold cases being solved. But I also think about all the people who have been exonerated
Hmm.
because of this technology. So it really works in a lot of just amazing ways to solve crime. And I don't think that case law will change in this. I think still a search warrant will be sufficient to get this information. But I agree with you that we're going to see lawsuits down the road on some of these cases.
I wonder if it's just going to be a matter of the disclaimer, if you will, when you sign up for something like a 23andMe or an Ancestry, you go through that litany of legalese that no one ever reads. You just scroll to the bottom and check the box. Is that essentially they put an extra line in there that says, look, if we're under a warrant, we're going to give this up whether you like it or not? Does that cover this issue if they were to do that going forward? I wonder.
I think it would cover it, but you know how that is.
Yeah.
Even if it's covered, people are going to fight.
Sure.
It happens all the time. But I think there are some disclaimers in this information. I mean, depending on which website you use, but
Sure.
certainly people are going to check that box, Tony, because they want to know whether they're Swedish or whether they're
Hmm.
American Indian.
Yeah, or if they're part border collie. I've thought about turning in my dog's DNA just to see what it says. And I'm
People
curious if
do it
anyone's
all
ever
the time.
done that, but we'll have to
Oh, they
see.
have.
Yeah, I know there's dog DNA, but I'm saying submit the dog DNA to the human DNA and see what comes
Oh,
back.
oh my God, that would be funny, Tony. I don't know that anybody's done that. You got to do it and let us know how it comes out.
It's a holiday experiment. If I get one in as a present this year, I think that's what I'll do. Because I've already done mine. Why not do the pets? See what comes back. Let's talk
I
about some
love
of
it.
the mounting evidence that is there against Bryan Kohberger as we kind of wrap up this year and everything that we've been looking back on. There is quite a bit that is there, even if we are to take the IgG and that sort of stuff out of play, take even DNA out of play here for a moment with the knife sheath and all of that. The phone records, those are things that we know parts of, but we don't know the full extent as to what they actually have. We've heard about the triangulation, we've heard about pinging, but what we don't know yet is, the Google search history. What actually is on the phone? What images are on the phone? What's on Instagram? There's been leaks and such saying that possibly there was some sort of messages on Instagram between Kohberger and one of the victims. It's an unconfirmed report, but that is possibly out there. No word on if there was a reply back and forth. But what do you think we're going to discover there once this actually gets to trial? Is that going to be one of the bigger bombshells that we're waiting to see?
I can't wait to see the digital evidence, but I will say this with a caveat. I thought they would be more successful in returning DNA from the vehicle.
True.
Having said that, I think there are many logical explanations why they didn't. And we also do not know, as I've said before, and people have misconstrued what I've said, so I'll say this crystal clear.
Yeah.
DNA is contained in hair, in semen, in blood, in skin cells, but that doesn't mean that that hair is DNA
Mhm.
or that blood is DNA, right? It has multiple other proteins and components. And only parts of the blood, by the way, even have DNA. My point is that sometimes staining and a blood sample cannot have DNA that's able to be acquired from it.
Mhm.
So I look forward to seeing if anything blood related was found in his vehicle, even though we know, at least according to the defense attorney's paperwork, that there was no DNA recovered. Tony, one of the things that to me was a red beacon that I saw, that I think many people focused on the fact that, oh, there was nothing found in the car. Well, did you notice they didn't even mention the house, Tony?
Yeah.
Don't you think that if there would have been no DNA other than the sheath found in the house, that they would have said, and also, despite everything they did at the house, no more of Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found there. That isn't what they focused on. They focused on that it wasn't in the car,
Hmm.
or in the apartment and the other places. So I just, to me, that was the really stuck out to me, and I think it'll be interesting to see what else, in other words, was found in that house.
Are there surprises to be had there? Obviously, all of this under seal gag order in place. What sort of surprises beyond that do you think we're going to see when this actually does go to trial?
Well, I think we're going to see some just fascinating evidence. I look for, one of the main points of evidence is when he, again, if it is Bryan Kohberger, attacked, there will be, as he struck with the knife, there will be spatter that casted off or cast off blood. It will make an impression around where the killer would have been. Does that make sense? If I'm
Hmm.
standing over you and striking you, the blood would spatter on that person as well as the surrounding area, but not where that person is.
Hmm.
So I really look forward to seeing some of that recreation, if you will, to show the height, to show the logistics of this killer and exactly how he stood over them, maybe knelt over them, leaned over them, and committed these crimes. And I think that'll be telling to show the size
Hmm.
of the individual involved, and as well as possibly the right-handed and left-handedness, possibly, of the person involved.
It's
Um,
amazing that we're able to narrow things down that way. How solid is that sort of science when it comes to blood spatter and determining the height of the attacker themselves, the position that they were in, and such? I remember hearing a lot about that in the case that was featured in the documentary, "The Staircase." Uh, that was very interesting to see how splatter worked and all that. How how well does that read to a jury when we're talking about things like that, and how difficult, or how easy is it rather, for the defense of Kohberger to try and poke holes in things like that?
well, what I've found is that when you have a scientist on the stand, whether he's talking about cellular, phone, digital evidence, whether he's talking about blood splatter, whether he's talking about DNA, this is what juries like to hear.
Mhm.
They're going to hear witness testimony, and it's going to be interesting to them. But typically, what they, really respond to are facts that are brought in that are more indisputable, like scientists talking about why they reach their derivatives. So, would that alone be, something you could convict somebody on? No. But when you add it all together, you know, guy and the outfit that was, at least I think she said 5'10" or more, with the bushy eyebrows, combined with this digital cellular information that you're going to have, placing him in and around the area, having the phone turned off at the time, the video evidence regarding the Elantra that he drove.
Mhm.
um, when you add all the blood spatter that's going to become, an evidence, and then possibly other DNA that could have been left behind, that wasn't addressed by the defense. When you add it all together, it is a recipe,
Oh,
and I think it's a recipe that's going to hurt Bryan Kohberger.
yeah, well, let's also not forget about the DeSales University study that he was trying to conduct, and some of those questions there, like why did you choose that victim over others after committing the crime? What were you thinking or feeling? That really gets into the mindset of, a killer. I mean, it could be, yes, someone doing some university study work, but when put together with everything else, it certainly looks very damning.
It does look damning. I think the defense, though, is going to try to knock that, if they do even decide to bring it in,
Mhm.
with that, oh, listen, these are standard questions. Many people have used it in the program. I've heard some information about that. At least I think that's what the defense will try to run with, right? Another study that was done by another student that was similar, to try to really downplay the role of all of that. But it's going to be very difficult to downplay his own writings that came early on, that talk about the visual snow and some of the other issues. I could see some of that coming in, quite frankly.
Yeah. It will be interesting once this eventually does make it to trial. We've been talking for a long time about when this will actually happen. So far, I think you've been in the lead in predicting this. It was supposed to happen earlier this year. Now it's kicked down somewhere. We don't even have a date. You were saying, I believe, on one of our last conversations, you'd be surprised if it even happened in 2024. Are you still feeling that way?
Absolutely. I'll be surprised if it happens in 2025. I think 2026, hope might be a possibility.
Hmm.
I just, unfortunately, there will be so many delays with every ounce of this evidence that comes in.
Hmm.
Look for the prosecution to have suppression hearings on how it was acquired, on just the facts surrounding each of those cases. And those are going to be a little bit like little mini trials, these little mini hearings. When I look back at, as an example, um, their the case that they put on to limit the media,
Hmm.
right? When you look at that, they, I believe, had three, I think it for sure two, I think it was two media experts on that end,
Yeah.
and and then had this exhaustive report that was done. It got pointed out. Experts like these are hundreds an hour,
Yeah.
and a report like that costs tens of thousands of dollars. And that's what they did just for the media. And then, of course, we saw with the genetic genealogy piece, they did have three experts on that piece that they hired. And of course, that didn't fare very well for them. Um,
No, that one
when
did
one of
not.
the experts, no, that one went south. But that is what's going to continue to prolong that. Those are just examples of, I think, other hearings and issues we're going to be seeing, and extreme the extremes that they're going to go to present their position in those hearings.
Going to be a fascinating year in 2024 for this case, without a doubt. Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you want more of our interview with our guests, be sure to check out our podcast, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Just search that wherever you download podcasts and press subscribe. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel for the full video version of the interviews as well, under the same name, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Check it out, subscribe, binge, and enjoy. Thanks for watching.